This morning, I would like to talk to you about importing text files. For most of you, this will be revision. And you'll see the question here is, what does a transaction look like? Do you know what a transaction looks like? And of course, the answer is yes, you do. The reason I'm asking this question is because people don't realize that when they explain to a computer program such as ACL what a transaction looks like, that they actually really need to know what a transaction looks like. They need to know from an IT point of view, from a computer program's point of view, what a transaction looks like. So we know as human beings instinctively what a transaction is, but a computer has no instinct, no knowledge of the human world. So we have to explain to it in terms it understands which things are transactions. Because ultimately we want to import into ACL transactions so we can analyze them, to see people exceeded their limits, to see if we bought twice from the same supplier for the same thing by accident, whatever it is we're looking for. So it's important that we import the correct things. It's important that we are able to identify transactions. And in text files particularly, this is important because with text files, you really have to tell ACL everything that's going on, including which items in the file you get are transactions. Now, the first thing in being able to explain to ACL what a transaction is to know your data very well. One of the things we need to know is how many lines of detail each transaction has in the file that the client gave us, in the text file. We also need to know if everything in a specific field has the same length. By that, I mean, if you think about an invoice number, if you generate an invoice number internally, let's say it's 5 digits long. The chances are that every single other invoice number you generate will be 5 digits long as well for a very long time to come. But something like a supplier name or a customer name varies in length. The length of an address, the number of letters and digits in address vary. So the length of some fields, the content of some fields vary, and the length of some fields are standardized. And we need to be aware of this. So here is some data that some of you might recognize from the beginner's course. I've just taken a screen grab of some of it. And I need to answer, amongst other things, the question, how many lines are there for each record, for each transaction? In other words, how many lines of detail can we see? Now, if you look at the headings only for a second, the headings are often a guideline, a good guide to help us in a text file. We don't look at headings in isolation, of course. We always look at the data and the formatting of the text file we were given as well, because that gives us information too sometimes. But headings can help us a lot. So I notice here there's a heading PO number, purchase order number, vendor number, supplier, division, purchase order date. I haven't got the whole data set, the full report pasted into my slide here. But underneath those headings, you see some more headings, other payments, contract amount, and variance. So that tells me logically that there must be in this file some information like other payments, contract amount, and variance underneath the other headings. Now, if I look, for example, at that block there of data, I can see if I try and use the headings to guide me, there's a purchase order number. We issued a purchase order to a supplier, the number of which was 483739. Then if I look at that first heading, the vendor number is 11663. And similarly, I have some other information here, the supplier name, the division, the purchase order date. And underneath here, this 20.09 refers to other payments. As a human being, I first need to understand what's going on in this file that I was given. Because if I don't understand it, I cannot explain to ACL what this transaction looks like. So this transaction here is not a simple case of everything, all the details fitted into this first line here. Some of the details were put by the client into the second line. And some people, make their lives complicated and they start thinking about all sorts of complicated scenarios in ACL that don't exist, that only exist in their imaginations. Think first as a human being. Where are my transactions? Is this my first transaction? And the answer is, of course, this thing in this red block is my first transaction. And if I wanted to, I could number the lines in this transaction. That line where I see 483739, 11663, More Power Industries Development, and the purchase order date is line 1. The second line in the block is that one where I see 20.09 to 650.09 and 622.65. So this transaction requires 2 lines. It has 2 lines of detail. The physical reality in the real world is that you cannot fit all the details across your page, whether you're printing it out or whether you're saving it electronically. We often have to press enter, so to speak, somewhere at the end of a line to push more data to another line. So sometimes a transaction is like a paragraph in English. A paragraph in English might be 1 sentence, but very often it's multiple lines. A transaction is often multiple lines in files that we get from clients, in text files that we get. Right, so similarly, I can go to this section here and say, right, there's another transaction. I want to make sure I can identify these transactions to myself. I need to know what they are. Otherwise, I can't explain to ACL which things are transactions, where they are, and so on. And this transaction, again, I can number the lines in that red block. That's line 1, that's line 2. This transaction has 2 lines of detail. And similarly for this one, there's line 1 of the transaction, there's line 2. So the transactions on this page in this slide all consist of 2 lines of detail. It's important that I know this, because if I do not know that each transaction has 2 lines, let's say I mistakenly think each transaction consists of 1 line, what will happen is when I teach ACL where I think the transactions are, it will import only that 41737212248 global trade hardware development and the date. It will not import the other details, the other payments, the contract amount, the variance, because I have neglected to tell ACL in this scenario that that is also another line in the same transaction. And those pieces of information might be crucial to some of my audit procedures later, but they will not be in ACL because I made the mistake and I told ACL that this transaction consists of 1 line when in fact it consists of 2. I should have told ACL 2. So it's important I know exactly what my transactions look like so I can tell ACL what I see and what's going on. Right, here's a different file. This one, a lot of people make this mistake. They see this and they say, okay, that whole thing is my first transaction. And I see this transaction consists, if I count, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. But that's not correct. Do not jump to a conclusion. Look closely before you draw conclusions. Just like auditing, you don't draw up your audit report the second you discover something in your data or you discover an exception. You investigate further. You think more carefully about it before you draw any conclusions. So this is the wrong conclusion. Have a look at that yellow block. That is a purchase order number column. And you'll see there are different purchase order numbers here: 392507, 960469, 937382, and so on. The reason those purchase order numbers are different is because they are separate transactions. Do not let the formatting confuse you. It does not matter how this report is formatted. They didn't write 10001 repeatedly down here. They didn't write Bolton distribution repeatedly down there. That's fine. That does not change the physical reality that these are separate purchase orders, separate transactions. And that's what matters to us when we tell ACL. ACL, these are separate transactions. This is not one transaction with 7 lines. So the correct answer would be, that is where one of my transactions is, in that red block. It consists of only 1 line. I can only write the number 1 there. There isn't another line in that block for me to write the number 2. That transaction consists of 1 line. The next transaction is over there. It's also only 1 line of detail. Don't let the blanks confuse you. Again, don't do that. Say to yourself, I'm still thinking as a human being to figure out what's going on here. I haven't told ACL anything yet. As a human being, would I be able to tell that this is, do I know this is vendor 10001? The answer is yes, we can tell it is. Our brains tell us because of the data above. We can tell this is Bolton distribution. We can tell from the purchase order number and from the issue date, and among other things, that this is a separate transaction. So do not think in ACL terms, or try to think in what you might think are ACL terms, if you do not yet in human terms know exactly which things are transactions. Imagine you were standing in class of, in front of a class of students who are doing accounting for the first time. Would you really tell them that all 7 lines are one big transaction? Or would you say to them, I can see there are different transactions because of the purchase order number. Don't let the formatting confuse you, class. I could fill it in with a pen. Think what you would tell this class of accounting students. Right. Similarly, this is 1 transaction, 1 line, and all of these are just 1 line. So it's very simple. Now, the total, by the way, is not a transaction. Too many people get caught up in the total and say, oh, there's a total, I want to import it. Do not import totals. As no matter how tempting it might be, especially if you're learning ACL, if you haven't used ACL a lot before, do not import totals. Those are not transactions. We have ways of dealing with totals in ACL. We have ways of getting totals. Avoid the temptation. As an auditor, we don't, as a general rule, go and analyze the totals. We analyze the transactions. Just stay away from the temptation. Once you have a lot of experience with ACL, you might one day find yourself in a position where you think, okay, in this particular case, it might be useful for me to import the total. But at that stage, you would know as an experienced ACL user if it's appropriate. I can tell you now, almost all the time, it is not appropriate. So when you start working with ACL, don't even look at totals. Don't import them. They are not transactions, leave them alone. All right. Another issue when we tell ACL later on what a transaction is the record identifier. And a record identifier is something that is common to each transaction. So there might be a comma in each transaction for argument's sake. A record identifier also, we need to know, is something that can be found only in a transaction. I don't want to say to ACL, if there is a comma in a line somewhere, it's a transaction. Well, what if there's a comma in the heading? So it says something like purchasing report of ABC traders, comma 2020. That comma in that heading is not a good guide to tell me if something is a transaction. So I need to be careful that whatever I choose as the thing that identifies or explains to us what a transaction is, that thing appears in every transaction, but only in the transactions. Now imagine also, again, that you wanted to explain to your colleague or to an accounting class which things in a text file, in a document, in a report are transactions. You say to him, I want you to highlight things for me. And you say to him, wherever you see a column, if you see a comma, highlight that line. Now, in my example, we had a comma in the heading, purchase order report or something like that, comma 2020, your colleague is going to then highlight that line as a transaction, and it's not a transaction. So it must be found, whatever I choose as this identifier must be found in every transaction, but only in a transaction. Right, the main types of record identifiers we have, there's really two. A specific symbol, like my example, look for a comma, or a pattern. So it might be a case of I have purchase order numbers that consist of, let's say, 6 digits. So look for where there's 6 digits in a certain place. There's my pattern. Now, another important part of record identifiers is position. People often forget this. We need, as a general rule, or we could even say always, we might always need to consider the position of something. So whether I'm looking at a specific symbol like a comma or a pattern like 6 digits, I need to indicate a position. Now, going back to my example where I wanted to tell ACL or the accounting class or my colleague that something with a comma in, a line with a comma in is a transaction, what we could do is we could rather say to ACL, if there is a comma in a very specific position, but not in the position where it is in the heading, in a very different position, then that tells me something's a transaction. So I'm making it less easy for ACL to mistake a heading line, for example, as a transaction. I'm saying this symbol in this position is what identifies a transaction. Sometimes our position might actually be a range from position 10 to position 15, wherever that might be in my document. If I see a commas there, or if I see 6 digits there, or whatever it is, that tells me something's a record. And sometimes position is very flexible. We simply say, if you see something in a line anywhere, a comma in a line or whatever in a line, that tells me it's a record. So let's quickly go into ACL. Let's play with some of the text files, right, that we've already seen. So I'm going to import a file, and I'm going to go look for purge ord first, right, purgeord.txt. So I'm just going to click next, and this is where I get to the screen. At this point, I need to look closely and I don't understand what's going on with this data, because I cannot teach ACL what's going on unless I know. And of course, we've already looked at this. As you can see, that each transaction consists of 2 lines. Now, the identifier is obviously something very important. How do I know something is a transaction? I've got to look for something that is the same, maybe a symbol, maybe a pattern. The position is important, and the position might be very flexible, or it might be a range. So let's play with this a little bit. Now remember, when we import data in a text file, we always need to tell ACL also where the first transaction starts. The first piece of information in the first column for that first transaction. That would be this pure number. So I'm going to highlight that. And please remember not to highlight anything unnecessarily. Makes no sense for me to highlight those spaces because there's nothing there. Spaces, unnecessary spaces give us lots of grief when we analyze data, and we've got to then fix it. So don't introduce spaces unnecessarily just don't. Where you're forced to, well then fine, you're forced to. But if you don't need to, then don't introduce unnecessary spaces. So of course, I'll quickly give this field a name, PO number, it's character. That's fine. My focus for this presentation now is really identifying the transactions. I think I know as a human being which things in this report, in this text file are transactions. I'm trying to figure out now how to say to ACL which things are transactions. So the next thing I've got to do is choose the record identifier. As I said, I could use a symbol or a pattern. So what I could do is if I choose a symbol, I could say, all right, I notice there is a dot over here between 20 and 09. Now, this transaction, we decided earlier when we were looking at PowerPoint, consists of 2 lines. So this dot is in line 2 of this transaction. The question is, does my next transaction have a dot in line 2? Yes, it does. In fact, it has a dot in the same position. There's a ruler at the top here. Now, I'm not sure what the exact position is, but it looks like it could be about position 13 or 14, something like that. So I decide I'm going to highlight this dot and say, hey, so if you see that identifier, that dot in that specific position, this is how you can spot a transaction. So I'll highlight that. And notice here, ACL has in this case highlighted both lines in gray of that transaction. To the left of the OK button up here, it says there are 2 lines in the record, right? There are 2 lines of detail for a transaction, which is actually correct. We always verify that. We don't assume ACL got it correct, but in this case, it has got it correct. Now, this dot here is in position 13 on my ruler. So there is 10, there's 11, there's 12, there's 13, right? Okay, it's a bit difficult to see here, but it's in position 13. So we're saying include as a transaction, in other words, highlight anything where you see a dot in line 2 of whatever it is we're looking at, and it must be in position 13 on the ruler. Now that's fine, that is correct. That correctly identifies my transactions. And of course, after this, I then highlight my remaining fields in blue. I'll just highlight 2 of them, 2 more of them, should I say. So I'll highlight, or maybe 3 of them. Let's say vendor number, I'll highlight quickly. That's character, click OK. No need for spaces, they're the same lengths. Now I'm going to make a mistake here first. I'm going to highlight More Power Industries, and I'll call a supplier. This is character. Now, this is a mistake because this is one of the examples I gave you where things have varying lengths. You do not have the same supplier length all the time. You can see widths and partners. There are spaces afterwards that have been selected, which is actually fine because I don't want to cut off part of More Power Industries. The problem is further down in this report, you see I have cut off part of the supplier name. You have to be careful with things that have varying lengths. I should look at the data itself. I should use my knowledge from the environment I work in, and I should use the formatting and the headings and so forth to guide me to see what's going on here. I see under the heading supply, there are dashes that go all the way up to there. That means there could be a supplier name that is that long. Now, to fix this, remember, please don't do this. This is the worst thing you can do. If you highlight over the same thing to try and fix it, you are now creating a second column. Every time you highlight with this blue highlighter, whenever you do blue highlighting, you create a second column. So I'm going to have 2 supplier columns. Don't do that. To fix this, either I need to right-click in that blue More Power Industries field and delete the field so that I can highlight it correctly up to the last dash, or I need to go to Edit Field. Now, if I go to Edit Field, I need to then go to Advanced Options, and I need to go to where it says Field Width. The number of symbols I highlighted, the field length, right? I highlighted 21. Now I have to guess because I've decided to use a solution what the length is up to there. If there were just a bunch of letters and spaces up to the last dash, what's the length? I will guess 40. It might be too small, it might be too long. Let's see. Okay, well, that's a good guess. I didn't expect that. I should play the lotto. All right, so that there goes right up to the last dash. Now I'll highlight one more column because we don't have time to highlight all of these. I want to highlight other payments. Now some people start panicking here. They start going, but what about this at the top? What about it? That's a vendor number. Why are you stressing about what ACL may or may not do because you're inventing scenarios in your head about how ACL works? Just trust the process and say, okay, I'm busy highlighting fields. I need to highlight other payments. I need to highlight the 20.09. Now again, this is where people make a mistake too. They highlight just the 20.09, bad move. Who says there isn't a payment of 100? If I do this, I might chop off one of the digits to the left of one of the amounts somewhere in this report. So where do I start? Now, this is when other people make a mistake again. They look at the dashes of vendor number. For goodness sake, remember your headings. You had a close look at the data before you started trying to tell ACL what's going on here. You had a look at your data set. Vendor number is the top thing, 11663. Other payments is the heading for the bottom thing, 20.09. So if I'm going to highlight using dashes as a guide, I need to use the dashes of other payments. So highlight from there, other payments. Okay, this is numeric, and because it's numeric, I must make sure ACL knows how many decimals there are. In this case, there are 2 decimals in the source, right? So that's fine so far. Another mistake people make is, for example, when they highlight the PO number or the vendor number or anything, they highlight 2 lines, thinking that they have to somehow tell ACL that this transaction has 2 lines. Once the gray highlighting is done, it's done. ACL can see the transaction's 2 lines. Don't worry about the gray highlighting and the 2-line story once you've done the gray highlighting. The gray highlighting is finished, it's over, it's in the past. Just highlight the information that must go in the PO number column. That blank line underneath must not go in the PO number column. You're going to create problems for yourself. Okay? Don't overthink it, just be systematic. All right, so I'm not going to click on next because my main focus here is to identify which things are transactions. So I'm going to delete all this highlighting. I want to start again. I need to explain to ACL how I know something is a transaction. So of course, I start with the first piece of information for the first transaction. I give it a field name, I check the data type, then I click OK. And I notice there's a slash here in the PO date. So I decide, all right, I'm going to say to ACL, if there's a slash there, then this is a transaction, if there's a slash in this position. And I notice here, ACL has highlighted only the first line of detail. It hasn't highlighted the second one in gray. Because it's thinking, not very clearly, but it's thinking like a computer does. Oh, well, you're highlighting up here, so this must be 1 line per transaction. Now, this is incorrect. I need to quickly fix this and tell ACL there are 2 lines per transaction. So I'm saying if there's a slash in line 1 of 2 lines, and it's in position 80 on the ruler, there's position 80, you can more or less see the slashes in position 80, that tells me it's a transaction. I click OK, and there it's perfect. Please remember, always check your gray highlighting before you highlight what's in the fields. You're wasting your time if most of these things are not highlighted or if they're highlighted incorrectly. Now notice up here, there is a slash here, purchasing report 12/2017, but ACL hasn't highlighted this as a transaction. That is because part of a record identifier is the position. So whether I use a symbol or pattern is irrelevant, the position is also important. Okay, this symbol, this must be in a certain position. I said position 80. This is not in position 80. So this is fine. As long as the identifier, that symbol with that specific position does not appear elsewhere, then that's fine. This symbol is the same as that one, but not the position. So ACL won't get confused and think that's a transaction. Now, let me just make a mistake here. I'm quickly going to right-click in the gray area and go to edit record, which is convenient sometimes if you've made a mistake. Instead of deleting everything, sometimes it's easier just to right-click in the gray and go to edit record, and you might be able to quickly make a change. Might be, not always, right? So I decide I don't like this second option here, exact match. Exact match refers to, among other things, that position. I want to see something is a transaction if I see that slash in exactly position 80. So I say, okay, wait a second. I'm going to change this to find in range. There is a range, so I might highlight this whole date. It's a bit silly that I'm doing this in this particular data set, but if starting position 78, going up to and including position 87, if there's a slash anywhere there, this is a transaction. I click OK. Oopsie, sorry, let me just see what I did here. Sorry, that's supposed to be a slash. Okay, I must just be careful with what I highlight before I click OK. So if I see a slash anywhere in that range, then it's a transaction. So somewhere in that range from 78 to 80, whatever it was, this is a transaction because there's a slash there somewhere. Again, this is not a transaction based on my explanation to ACL because those slashes are not in that range. If I make this range too generous, I'll say, okay, anywhere from position 20 to 87, if there's a slash, this tells me it's a record, a transaction. ACL is going to highlight that now because there's a slash somewhere between position 20 and 80 something else. So when I use range, if it's necessary, it's not necessary here, it's very important that I don't start too far to the left or go too far to the right. Sometimes things do shift a bit in your data. Sometimes your data, your symbols, you have a slash or a dot always in every transaction, but they're not in exactly the same position always. They're a bit to the left, a bit to the right, but not too far to the left, or too far to the right from the first dot or slash, whatever it is that you saw. So then you could use range. Now, similarly, I could say, all right, let me just change this back. Let me change this to exact match position 80 again. Right, so this is fixed. Now, I decide I want to identify a record using the slash, and I want to say find in line. Find in line means look for a slash anywhere in that line. If there's a slash anywhere in the line, it's a transaction. And of course, it's going to pick that because now my range is the whole line. So my position is just too broad for this particular set of data. So it would be safer for me if I'm going to use the slash to stick with exact match position 80. Now, some people want to get very fancy always. Don't. If there's a simple solution like find the slash in position 80, you stick with it. The second you get fancy, you accidentally pull through all sorts of nonsense and start leaving out transactions as well. If you can keep it simple, then do so. That's always best. Simple is always best, right? So there we have exact match slash. Right, now I'm going to try and do this again. Let's see, let me delete this record, although I could just edit it, right? Just going to delete it, start again. I'm going to say, all right, I want to use patterns instead of a symbol like a dot or a slash. I notice that there's always a PO number here. In other words, there are always 6 digits here. So highlight those 6 digits. But what will happen is you'll notice that the second transaction here, none of it is highlighting gray. Same with the third, same with the fourth, because of this exact match. I have said to ACL, if you see exactly those digits, 4, 8, 3, 7, 3, 9, in that position, starting in position 1, then it's a transaction. Now, obviously, that's not what I meant to say. So sometimes the exact match gets in the way. And I need to change it this time to numeric. Now, for goodness sake, please don't get confused here. This word numeric in this context does not mean numeric data. PO numbers are never numeric data in ACL. This, in this context, means we see a bunch of digits. And here you notice the range, starting in position 1, going up to position 6. If there's one digit after the other, whatever those digits are, that means it's a transaction. Now, of course, the lines in record are wrong. I need to change it to 2 for this file. So I click OK. So there we can see now, I've highlighted all these things because I've identified the pattern. Now, some people think, well, it's easier in this file just to go to the pattern than to look for the dot or the slash. In one way, I would agree. On the other hand, I would discourage you from doing it. I want you to get used to looking for the finest details, dots, slashes, because most of the time, that's what you do in most files. Most of the time, that's a simpler solution. And also, you need to be able to incorporate the simple and the fancier solutions like formats when you have more complicated text files. Very, very, very few text files are very complicated. I had one client years ago where I traveled to them in another country and I spent 2 nights in a hotel room trying to find the record identifier. It was a whole long story about this symbol and this pattern and all sorts of things. But for the most part, stick to what is simple, and then you can go to the fancy stuff afterwards if you really need to. So stick to the symbols as a general rule. Okay, so let me delete that. Let's get a bit fancier. But again, I should not be getting so fancy for this file. This file is very simple. So I'll highlight this PO number here, this character. Now I want an identifier. I want to maybe use the vendor number. Now I'm thinking of using the numeric trick, but I want to do it in a more complicated way. I'm going to say, all right, let me highlight that. I don't want exact match because that means ACL will think anything with that vendor, only that vendor is a transaction. The other vendors, they don't count as as having transactions, as forming transactions. So I'm going to change this instead of numeric, which would be the more sensible thing to do if I wanted to say there's a bunch of digits there. I'm going to choose custom map. Now remember the word map in ACL, we learned the map function. We use it when we are looking for things that have specific formats. So I'm looking for something where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits. So I'm going to delete this. Now, because of the word map, I need to find a way to say any 5 digits. And that is simple. When you see the word map, 9 means any digits. I need to put 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any 5 digits in that position. Now, of course, this works so far. Oops, yeah, I forgot to change the number of lines, right? This works in this file, but it's dangerous because there could be a number up there. So it's better to stick to something simple just in case. Look for the dots, look for the slashes, and so forth. All right, so that works as well. Now, let me do something really silly again. I'm going to identify this record in a very contrived way, not because I should be doing it like this in this report, but because this is how you have to do it with certain text files where the simple solutions don't work. So this is my PO number field, which is character. And I'm going to use that silly solution and say, if there's a slash anywhere in the line, then it tells me it's a transaction. And of course, you know what's going to happen. Let me just fix the number of lines, sorry. 2 lines. Okay. You know what's going to happen? It's going to highlight that line because it's got a slash. It will highlight the blank underneath, by the way, because there are 2 lines per transaction. Now, I decide for whatever bizarre reason, maybe I've had too much tea or too much coffee this morning, I decide for some strange reason that I like this method for this file of saying it's a transaction if I find a slash anywhere in the line. But obviously, I don't want to include that there. So I'm going to now do the following. I'm going to right-click in my valid transaction and go to Edit Record. And I'm going to click on End. And I'm going to add another criterion to this rule to explain to ACL which things are transactions. So I'm going to click on Add. So how do I know if something's a transaction in this very complicated way of identifying it? Well, if there's a slash anywhere in this line here, but also the slash on its own is not enough. It's not enough to identify a transaction. Also, there has to be a dot over here. So, and there must be a dot over there. And I click OK, and that's now eliminated because there isn't a dot over there. Obviously, it would have been simpler just to say there's a dot there, finish, end of story. But the point is there will be files where you have to narrow these things down. Now, one of our clients, I won't mention any names, but they are a very big organization, a very big ACL user, and their trial balance is not a simple case of just look for the dot. There are letters in there that they have to use to identify certain things and things like dots and so forth. They have to use 2 or 3 symbols to identify to ACL which line items are balances for GL accounts in their trial balance. Okay, but these principles are important. So these are some of the things I can do here. You know, I've used add. Now let me go to another file completely. Let me cancel this. We titled this import, right? Let's import or start the import process for a different file. I'm going to go to this reports.txt. And let's just have a look at this. Now, you know from the beginner's course, the second you see highlighting, delete it. It might be correct, it might be incorrect. It just takes too much time, even if it is correct, to edit things and it becomes confusing. Just start from scratch. So you right-click in the gray or white space and you choose the option delete record. Okay, so here we can see there are inventory items. Never mind that heading for the moment. Let's pretend for the moment it doesn't exist, right? So here there are inventory items. The first product here has a product number, followed by the name of the product description, the quantity we have on stock in our supermarket shelf maybe. So you better go and buy some quickly. I must actually look in this report to see if there are toilet rolls. Right, the unit cost is there, the total cost is there. So this inventory item contains only 1 line of detail. You can see it. The next line is a different inventory item. Sometimes your transactions, or in this case, your inventory items, only require 1 line of detail. If you've got enough space on the page, on 1 line of the page, it's fine. Going across, it's fine. You don't have to always press enter, you know, when typing details, or when the system types the details in a report, it doesn't always have to press enter to put, you know, more details of an item. So I need an identifier. Now, if I look here, the identifier, if I'm looking only for a symbol, would be the dot in unit cost. So I'll just quickly use the dot in unit cost. Okay, this is my product number, which is character. And here is the dot in unit cost. I'll highlight. And you've just got to be very careful, very delicate with highlighting, right? And there's 1 line per inventory item, and I click OK. So that's fine. That's easy enough. I did not highlight this total, which I don't want to import because it's not an inventory item. Because this dot is not the same as that one to ACL's mind because of the position being different. Remember, position is very important in using record identifiers. Now, I could obviously try something different. I could say, let me remove the dot there from unit cost, the one in position 59, I'm going to use this dot rather as my identifier. So I use that dot and I click OK. And good news is my inventory items are still highlighted. The bad news, of course, is the totals are highlighted. So the reason I'm doing this is to show you that sometimes you're going to have problems with identifiers. You might have a file where you don't have a choice. You have to choose a problematic identifier, like this dot I've chosen in total cost. Now, if you do have a choice, don't do what I did. But sometimes you really don't have a choice. So you will identify all your transactions or all your inventory items or all your employee records, whatever the case might be, correctly, but you might accidentally highlight other things by accident that should not be there. So what I can do is I need to first make sure I can see this thing that is highlighted incorrectly. That is not an inventory item. Because if I can't see it, I can't get rid of it. I need to see it to say, okay, I know I should get rid of it because of whatever criteria. So I'm going to right click here in this gray and I'll say edit record. Again, I'm going to go to end and I will choose and. Because and means I've got to have more than one condition to be true. If you remember my one session from earlier on in the series, I've got to have more than one condition to be true because that's what I'm doing. I'm doing conditions, I'm doing filters. For those of you who didn't see that, just remember and from your beginner's course means narrow down the list. I'm narrowing down the list, right? So I need something to be a transaction. I know it's a transaction because there's a dot there and it doesn't have the words totals. So and I need to exclude anything that has the word totals in it. So I'm going to highlight the words totals. You see why I needed to see this. If I can't see this problem, I can't highlight the word totals. So I'm saying, okay, how do I know if something's a transaction? Well, it must have in it a dot in position 17, and it mustn't have in it the word totals starting in position 17. So obviously the O of totals is in position 18, that small t is in position 19, and so on. But the point is that word totals starts in position 17. So this line here doesn't meet those criteria. This one here does. All of these, in fact, do. They all have a dot in position 71, and none of them have the word totals in position 17. So when I click OK, those are still highlighted. This isn't because it didn't meet both criteria. It does not have, it does have the word totals there. I said it mustn't have the word totals there if it's going to qualify as a record, as an inventory item. And if I scroll down, you'll see, for example, this is not an inventory item either, which is good news because we as human beings don't see it as an inventory item. But if I come right to the bottom here, there's an issue. The issue is this has been highlighted because this word totals is not in the same position as that. You can see it's out of line. Some people think, oh, well, it's because it's preset report totals. Stop thinking like that. Think very precisely when you try to understand what ACL is doing. We never mentioned the word class to ACL. I only highlighted the word total, so it has no reason to look at the word class. So the reason is the position. So if I right click here, go to edit record, I could say, okay, fine. I'm going to click on end. I'm going to say add. So something is a transaction if there's a dot in position 71 and it doesn't have totals in position 17. And also I need to exclude, and also it mustn't have the word totals in this position. So I'll highlight that totals. So if totals is in position 18, it's not a record. It's not an inventory item. There we go, problem solved. But this can become really painful and ridiculous if you have 20 of these words totals and each of them is in a slightly different position. This is where it would be practical for me to say, okay, this, and business with all these totals, it's too much. I'll click on this last one and choose delete criteria. I'm rather going to say, this exact match, I don't want it to look exactly in position 17. Totals keeps moving position in the line. I'm going to change it to find in line. If you find totals anywhere in the line, then exclude it. So I click on OK. Now, some people say, what if you've got an inventory item with the word totals in? Because now I would have unhighlighted that. Well, then you've got to find some other criterion to include it again. So you're going to need to go back here and you're going to need to click on end. But you need to say, or it has something else then included again, right? There is no example here. I'm not going to get too complicated with that right now. So here we have that scenario. Okay, let me delete this. And I want to explain to ACL which things are inventory items. So I'm going to say to ACL, this is my first piece of information for my first inventory item. That's fine. That's not controversial. And then I want to say to ACL, okay, how do I know something's an inventory item? Now, this is not a good way of doing it with this data, but I notice these have a 1 here. The second digit is a 1. So if there's a 1 in this position, it is a transaction. 1 line per transaction, or 1 line per inventory item rather. Now, by the way, notice there's a date up here. This is a 0. I'm lucky that that's a 0. At some point, that's going to become a 1. So this is not a very good thing I've done. So sometimes look at your headings as well, not to identify a record, but rather to say, if I identify a record using a symbol like this one here, is there a possibility that somewhere in one of these headings, there will be confusion in a few months' time when I get a new data set? And the answer is yes. There will be confusion when that becomes a 1 in that date. All right, but for now, we'll leave it as is. Now, if I scroll down, I notice these items aren't highlighted in gray. ACL doesn't know it must import them. That's because these do not have a 1 here. Now, the simple solution, obviously, is to go back and choose a sensible identifier like the dot, but I'm not going to be sensible right now. I'm going to right-click in the white or gray space and go to Edit Record. I want to see this thing that should be highlighted. I'll click OK to edit that. I'm going to say, right, this is not the end of my explanation of how to identify a transaction because it's hopelessly inadequate. I'm going to click on End. Now, those of you that the beginner's course learned the word all means add to the list. But of course, logically, you can go evaluate truth tables if you know about truth tables from early in the series. All basically means I know something's a transaction if I see a 1 there or I see a 2 there. So I'm going to highlight the 2. So I'm saying if I see a 1 in that position, 7 or a 2, that tells me it's a transaction. Right, let me just drag this down quickly. So I'm going to click OK. And there I've got transactions. Oopsie, I haven't got those. So now I have to go through this rigmarole again. But now I've got to highlight the 3. Now you'll agree this is very inefficient. This is very, very inefficient. I should not be doing it this way. I should have looked at my data more carefully. I should have tried to look for a simple solution. Because eventually, I'm going to run out of ors. Let me tell you, there will be a time when you run out of ors and ands. You might, you might have too many of these product classes. You might have product class, 40 or something eventually. Maybe you have a huge shop that you're auditing. And you're not going to have enough ors and ands. So I need to find a better way of doing this. But this is how all works. It keeps saying, okay, if it's got this, or this, or this, or the, this pattern, or the symbol, or this symbol in this position, whatever it is, also consider that to be an inventory item, or a transaction, or an employee record, whatever it is. All right, so we have and or. Now, let me start again. So I decide I want to audit only some of these inventory items for whatever reason. And I've got some really strange criteria. Everything that has a 1 here, this product class 01, everything there I need to audit. So that's fine so far. That's my product number. I'll highlight the 1 there or the 01. It doesn't match in this data set. And there we go. Now I can import that. I don't care based on what I've told you so far about the others. I only care about the 01s. Now I'm just thinking to myself, wait a second. There are some other things that I need to audit. Something bizarre happened in our accounting system, or some bug in the system that caused havoc with some of our products. For some reason, every product where the description started with a digit, whether it's a 1 or a 4 or a 7, something went hopelessly wrong. So I need to audit those as well, even if they are from different product classes. So for example, here, there's a 4 here, there's an 8 here. I should be auditing those too, because something went very wrong in our accounting system this year with products that start with a digit. So I can right click here and I can go to Edit Record. And I haven't included enough records I need to add to the list if you want to think of all that way. So something's a record if there's a 01 there or if there's a digit there. Now things can go horribly wrong here depending on how ACL feels. Now it's not exactly how ACL feels, but that's how I'm going to explain it for the moment. So I'm going to say, look, I'm going to highlight the 1 to indicate there's a digit there. And you see what I mean by things going horribly wrong. ACL has now said, okay, there are 5 lines in the record. You see it's changed the highlighting. It's trying to be helpful. It's trying to anticipate what I'm thinking. It thinks, oh, you're highlighting this 1 over here, and you told me earlier the first inventory item was there because you highlighted that product number first, and you told me there was 1 line per transaction. Hang on. I think that you're trying to tell me now as the auditor that the number of the first piece of information is in this first line, and this whole thing is one inventory item. You see, I was just trying to understand what I've done, and it's not doing a very good job here. Sometimes it won't do this, sometimes it will, like here. You've got to correct it. They're going to say, wait. This here must change. That must be in line 1. There's only one line per record. That must be a 1. Now, I still need to fix this part. I need to say, I'm not saying ACL if it's a 1, it's a transaction. I'm saying if it's any digits. I need my custom map, or I could just use numeric to be a bit simpler, numeric, if there's a digit there. Now I'm going to click, oops, let me change this back to a 1. Okay. I'm going to click OK, but before I do, be forewarned. ACL might not accept my changes. It might not. You never know until you click OK. So I'm going to click OK. Good news, it accepted my changes. Right? I'll come back to the scenario now where that might not accept my changes. So if I go down here, you see here, even though that isn't product class 01, I said it's a record if it's 01 or if you see a digit there. Now, of course, some of these here have a 01 and they have a digit. Remember the OR in ACL from one of the sessions earlier in the series is the inclusive OR. It includes a possibility that an inventory item might be product class 01 and might also start with a digit, so that's fine. Now, as I said to you, it's possible that when I click OK, this thing wants to give me grief here. When I click OK, ACL rejects my changes. Okay? If it does that, make a mental note of these settings at the bottom. Numeric, line 1, range 16 to 16, whatever the case is. Then you click on cancel, and then you edit this record again. You come back here, you click on all, you get this line, and you manually type in things. You do not highlight. The second you highlight, that's when ACL sometimes gets confused. So you manually type things in. All right, so let me delete that because now I've fixed it. I've included other things using all. Let me see if I can get ACL to be a bit confused. So I'm going to do a silly example. I say this is an inventory item because it's got a digit, a space, and a letter. So that's my first inventory item for this silly scenario. So this is a product number. This is a digit, a space, and letter. But of course, it won't highlight that because of the exact match. I'm not looking for exactly one space and a letter. Let me go to custom map. I'm going to rather say it must be a digit, a space, and an X. Again, you should know these symbols for map from the beginner's course, right? And I click OK. So far, so good. Now I decide, I've missed out something. This thing up here with the 40 is an inventory item as well. I know this because the last digit is a 0. It's a very silly rule, I agree. Doesn't make sense in the audit environment, but let's pretend it did. I need to highlight that as well. So let me right click here, edit, and I'm going to say all. I'm hoping ACL will, give me grief here. But so I'm going to try and include this as well because it's got a 0 over there. In position that. It's not giving me grief. Let me try a different one. Let me try 0 over there. Let's say I want to include that one. ACL likes me too much today. I want it to give me more grief and drama than you can imagine, and it really doesn't want to. Okay, fine. So it doesn't look like I'm going to get grief and drama here today. Because I was hoping to show you, I'm just going to click cancel, go back, and then manually type in the settings. So please don't click OK. If you click OK and you get an error message about you can't change this back to one line or whatever, don't accept ACL settings. Click on cancel after, and then just manually go back to edit record, do whatever you're doing, but instead of highlighting the 1, the dot, the 0, the whatever, type in all the settings manually and then click OK. Anyway, so let's suppose I've now identified what I think are the inventory items using some very strange criteria. Now I'm looking at this and I think, wait a second, this is not right. This thing here should not be an inventory item because there's an 8 there. If there's an 8 in front of the dot, it's not an inventory item. It doesn't matter what other criteria apply or don't apply. The second there's an 8 there in front of the dot, it's not an inventory item. So I need to go and say edit record. And then I go to end and I choose and to exclude this. Okay, so I'm hoping that this 8.00 will disappear, for example, but the rest, all of these will still be the same. Let's see if I get what I'm hoping for. So I want to exclude from here where there's an 8 over here. And ACL's giving me grief. Okay, Let's fix it, and let's hopefully, well, let's see if it accepts my changes this time. Aha, it's rejecting my changes. So this is where I make a mental note, right? If there's an 8 in line 1 in position 58, I need to exclude it. So I'm going to click cancel. I'm going to try again. Edit record. Use and. It was an 8 in line 1. You see I'm typing the settings now in position 58. Now the 8's gone. Let's just see. All right, it looks good to me. The point is you can use and or together. Now just be warned. You know that and or have a certain order in which ACL reads them. ACL is actually looking at the moment here for where there is a 0. So I should have said exclude there. I should have said exclude there. ACL is looking for where there's a 0 in the line, but not an 8. And then it's adding to it everything where there's that format. So let me just click OK, and let's see what it looks like. So there is a digit in a space, digit space letter, sorry, digit space letter. This is digits. Now, why is this one showing? Let's just see, because we said if there is a 0 over here and there isn't an 8 over there, that's fine, that's why it's showing. Right, now let's say for some reason I needed to do the or first. There's a problem because it's doing the and part first, this and that first, and throwing in all of those. I would need to probably go back a few steps. So let me just delete these criteria. The criteria themselves aren't important here for this example, the scenario. I want the and, the or to happen first. So, sorry, not the, well, yes, I want the or to happen first. So I'm going to just say or, let me just put an or in. Then whatever the or is, as I said, maybe I'll put a 0 there. It's really not important in this case. Let me just quickly fix this. Just want to make sure ACL accepts this. Oh gosh, okay, so if there's a 0 in position 60. Okay. So there we go. So if I do that, that's fine. So this is, let's say, what I want so far, but I want the or to be read first. So when I need to click on and before I click on and, I need to choose new group. Now, new group, notice it's basically separated these two lines from that one. Imagine there was a big bracket written to the left of that, a big open bracket there, and a big open bracket there. That's what I've done. I put the or inside brackets so that ACL assesses it first. And then we can do the and whatever it is that we were looking for. Okay, I mean, I might want to exclude something, exclude where there's an 8 over here. The point is, okay, this is probably going to reject all my changes. So let me just see if I can get it to accept it. If not, I'll have to remember this position 58 again. No, okay, it's rejecting my changes. So it's back to the scenario. I need to put a new group, so I put brackets around the or, make that an and, exclude in line 1 of the inventory item. Sorry, not exclude that, exclude the 8 from line 1 in position 58. So the main point is this. First do the or, then exclude from there if there's an 8 in that position. Right, so if I look through this report, the results might be slightly different from what they were before. I'm not going to go into it too much, but you can play with the brackets, in other words, the groups, and play with not having them as well. Most people don't know about this brackets trick. So if you want to do the or first, once you've done the or, click on the end button and choose new group. And it will put whatever in brackets. Now, it doesn't make sense for me to put this part in brackets on its own, but if I wanted to, I could say new group. Now it's in brackets on its own, which is a bit silly. Now you might have noticed, by the way, there's this option insert criteria. Let me just delete this criterion. If I want another criterion, I want an and. I decide instead of clicking and, I click on insert criteria. That's fine. It will give me an and automatically. Now, let's suppose I didn't want an and, I meant to put an or. So I want to change that. You see when I click on or, it doesn't change. So I prefer always to be safer. Whether I'm using and or, I avoid normally insert criteria and I choose and directly, which is what insert criteria would give me anyway, or I choose or directly. That way, if I stick to those two and I stay away from that one, I will never accidentally have an and that should be an or. So rather just stick with those two. Okay. Now, you'll notice also, so one thing that I want to remind you of as well when importing text files is this. In this inventory file, there are inventory items here, but there are headings. These inventory items are in our housewares department. The inventory items underneath are in the sporting goods department. It might be useful to import the department details as well. The rule is always, when you want to import information that is heading for other information, right? 01 housewares is head information, but it's a heading for this information below. Don't start with the heading, start with the details, start below the heading. So I would start here. Okay, and I'm shouting the field name. All right, I should start there, and I'll just choose a simple identifier. Oopsie, I made a mistake. It should be a dot in position 59, 1 line. And I can highlight this here. I'm going to use the queue of quantity to guide me. Call this product description. This is character. I'm quickly highlighting this because we're running out of time. This is quantity. This is numeric. Advanced options. Sorry, what am I looking for? Decimals, 0. Okay, unit cost. Let me quickly highlight that for you. This is numeric, advanced options, decimals 2. And then, of course, total cost. So I'm first dealing with the inventory items themselves, the details. Advanced options, 2 decimals. Right, you'll see ACL even writes here, detail. Now I want to import this information. You start the whole process from scratch. You highlight this here, the first piece of information. So don't worry about what you've done already. You finish that, ignore it. You're now busy with new information. Think of it that way. A new file almost. So I'm going to highlight 01. Now, we might have forgotten that we are dealing with the same file. We might think, oh, this is a new file. We might imagine we're seeing that. ACL hasn't forgotten. It gives you this message, and too many people freak out. Calm down. Okay, don't freak out. This option new record means this line here does not look like the ones below that you've highlighted. That's all it means. Click OK. Right, and of course the 01, I'll put it into a field later called product class. The identifier, in this case, if I look at these two lines, they have a hyphen in common, they have a 0 in common, they have a colon in common. If you are not sure what to choose as an identifier, obviously look at your data properly first. But if there is an issue or there's a danger that choosing the colon, for example, might pull through a total, then choose more symbols as an identifier. Now, in this case, it's not necessary. The colon would suffice, the hyphen would suffice. But let's say there is some issue in this file. You could choose more symbols. Say, it has to have all the symbols before I consider it information that I want to import. And there's 1 line per record. Now, notice ACL puts header 1. So this is a heading. This is my first heading. This is also my first heading, in a manner of speaking, because it's my heading here. The reason it says header 1 is because there could be a report in future with a heading above this, where it says City Johannesburg, City Lagos, City Cairo, because we have different branches of the supermarket maybe in, opening in different countries and different cities and so forth. And what you would do is, after you've finished highlighting all the information in this heading, is you would then turn your attention to the city heading, the city information, and you would repeat the process. But again, you would start from the bottom and go up. So once you finish the city heading, you would see something here that says header 2. Now you can, if it's going to confuse you when you're creating these things. So, okay, I'm going to get confused when I see header 1, header 2, whatever. Instead of calling it header 1, I'm going to call it product department or something like that. And when I click OK, it doesn't matter. There, it's called that. This is going to confuse me, maybe detail. I'm not sure what detail they're talking about. So when I edit this record, instead of calling it detail, I can call it inventory item. That's fine. Okay. So these are just basically the different pieces of information. ACL considers them different records, but we consider them as human beings to be part of the same information. This 01 housewares, I could take with my pen and write it on the screen next to this first inventory item and write it next to that one. Because to me, that is part of the information of this. But ACL sees them as separate things for the moment. But once you click on next and you go through this whole process and you save this and you see this in the view, ACL then starts seeing it the way we do. It puts 01 housewares next to each inventory item that was from there. Okay. Now, there's one more trick I want to mention to you that some of you heard before. There's no time to look at it in detail, but people often have this problem with, let's say, payroll files. With a payroll file, you have a real problem. Because with a payroll file, you have, I don't have an example to show you, I'll just go to my report file. With a payroll file, you do have a different number of lines per record. Okay, let me just quickly go back to my report file. You definitely do have a different number of lines per record. Think about it, right? Let's say this was a payroll file. This would then not be product class 01, this would be employee 01. And then you would have all the employees' income, sources of income and all their deductions. Most employees, they have only one source of income, a salary, but some have a salary and a bonus and a commission. And then some have different deductions. Some contribute to medical aid, some don't. Some are repaying a staff loan, some aren't. Some are contributing to some T fund. Some have a pension contribution, some don't. So the number of lines per record, if the deductions and the records, the deductions and the source of income are listed one under the other, number of lines per record per employee will vary. And the problem is with the text file, you have to say how many lines per record. So the trick would be to change your perspective completely. If this was a payroll file, employee 1, I would pretend that gross pay was an inventory item. There's my gross pay, there's the cost of my gross pay. There's my commission, there's the cost of my commission, and so forth. You change your perspective. And then you import it as if it was this actual file. So see something like this file in your head when you import a payroll file that is a text file, or any text file where the number of lines per record vary. See it as this particular file here that you've got, this inventory file. And I promise you it works. You get the data into ACL because now you are seeing employee 01 as a heading for a bunch of inventory items. Gross pay takes up one line, commission takes up one line, taxation takes up one line, etc. Every record consists of one line. If you change your perspective, you'll be able to import that thing of multiple with different lines per employee successfully into ACL because you are treating it as if it was inventory items like this file. And that actually works most of the time. Okay, right. Well, that's it for today. Unfortunately, we can't do much more with text files in our limited time, but we've covered most of it. Text files are very, very interesting, to be honest. To me, they're the most interesting type of file, but they are not the one I would recommend normally because it's time consuming normally to do this kind of stuff with the highlighting. Get direct access, ODBC access to your system, of course, if you can. If you can't, then try to get a DBase file. If you can't get that, get an MS Access file. If you can't get that, get a delimited file. If someone says to you they don't have delimited, ask for CSV. You'll be surprised how often you get a CSV file. And then if you can't get that, then you ask for a text file. All right, so that's it for today. And I will see you guys hopefully in the near future, all in good health in the training room. And maybe we'll speak online again. Let's see how it goes with the new extended lockdown. Have a good day.